have a full house, I would say. So before we start and before we start talking about value engineering, I would love to ask each one of you is just to give a literally 30-second introduction about your name, what you do, and the company that you work for. So I will start with Robert.
Thanks, Samo. Robert Marinelli, working as General Manager of Aerolink. 13 years experience here in the UAE, in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and still enjoying it. Still enjoying the game.
Excellent, excellent.
Tom Gilmartin, Business Development Manager with Alec Fit-Out. Been working with Alec Fit-Out for 8 years now. We specialise in turnkey fit-out of 5-star hotels, airports, cinemas and luxury mixed-use developments.
Good to have you, Tom. Thanks.
Robert MacDonald, I'm the Senior Estimating Manager at Alemco, MEP, and I've been here for 10 years with Alemco.
Morgan Tuckness with Recent Summer, Head of Global Hospitality Technical Services and Design Development. Architect by trade, Hospitality Development by craft, and second year in Dubai, previously from Singapore, and happy to be here.
Benoit McNamara from Select Group. I'm the design manager for a real estate developer, mainly involved in Dubai Marina, and now moving to the Business Bay. Been in Dubai for 5 years with 15 years experience as an architect as well.
Stephen Batchelor, Faithful and Gould, Operations Director, 11 years in the UAE, 20 years experience. We specialise in hospitality, retail, residential developments, and we're doing okay at the moment, and we're enjoying it. So,
fantastic. Well, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for taking from your valuable time and being here today. Moving very quickly direct into our topic. When we're talking about value engineering, one of the things that I've shared earlier on in one of the slides about the definition of value engineering, and I think each one of us has a different perspective. So I would start with Morgan, as they say, ladies first. Can you please just give me your view about what is value engineering from your own experience and your own perspective?
Sure. Value engineering, as you said, I think rightfully, Samir, it's a balance, right? It is a balance of scope, schedule, and budget. What we're all trying to do is create effective ways and cost-effective developments. That can only be done by balancing that. And value engineering is a little bit of a misnomer. The term was coined after World War II, after shortage of materials. The new thing that we're all afraid of is hearing that word value engineering, right? It's really about value management and value creation. We're trying to create the optimal product with the end user in mind for the minimal amount of cost. So that's what value engineering is and needs to be. It's about value creation and management.
Okay. Do you all guys agree with Morgan?
Very well put, yeah?
Yeah?
Good. This is starting off well.
There we go. That's a good start.
I mean, much more articulate than I may be able to do. But I suppose straight out the gate, like Morgan and yourself said, that balancing act, it's about really trying to stretch the capabilities, the budgets that you have. So I suppose what would be fair, especially for the audience and for the subject, is to very quickly dispel cost saving and value engineering. They're completely two different animals.
Yeah.
Cost saving is de-scoping and that, and value engineering really is trying to stretch that envelope. And I think even your opening sermon, if for lack of a better word, talked about balancing, and even Dr. Rashid said we have the capabilities, we have the access to 40 different types of discipline. It really is and we have a great, not exactly 40, but we have across the board the spectrum here in engineering, clients. It's about, I think, using those capabilities and really exploring what you can get out of those disciplines to bring value and to increase the performance to the end user.
In the MEP business, obviously we're generally first in line on target value engineering, and that can go either way. It can be done either very responsibly or irresponsibly. Funny enough, Ben was one of our clients at the moment, We're doing a large-scale development for them at Marina Gate. And they approached us, and we went through a systematic value engineering process where, as a principle, we tend not to value engineer any of the mechanical plant, obviously because that's the heart and soul of the MEP. And we focused on dead systems, basically, so cable containments, tray, pipe, and every decision we made was in conjunction with Select Group, their engineer, and their facilities management guys, who played a huge role in all that, to what they would accept and what they wouldn't. And what we proposed, I think 100% of it was responsible proposals. About 80% of it got through to the benefit of the client. We got no benefit out of it. And you know, one of those towers is complete and open and occupied now, and I think Joe Benoit will tell you he's very happy with the product.
You know, the biggest challenge that we face most of the times that we're not all aligned about the value engineering objective or what we're trying to achieve. You know, it's easy sometimes when you go and meet with your client and you're a consultant or you're a contractor, or even when you're a developer and you say, I would love to conduct a value engineering workshop. Do you think most of the people or all of the people in that room are aligned to the same objective? I think this is where it becomes a little bit challenging, and this is where I can ask Tom from, you know, a contractor point of view. How do you feel about that?
Alignment is a core focus at ALEC and ALEC Fit-Out. What you need to make sure is that you have the client, the consultant team, and the contractor all understanding where they want to go. You have a design intent and you have a budget. And as part of the bidding team, you will sit with the client, typically their procurement guys, and it's very important that you schedule and outline the V that's proposed, and it's agreed in principle by the client or the consultant team. Where the alignment sometimes fails is then taking it from that to site.
Yep.
Because sometimes you can have different teams, and the value engineering that's proposed as part of the bidding is then rejected on site, and then that leads to conflict and it leads to delays. And I think this is a key area where we have to try and manage it and try and educate people on implementing value
But
engineering.
isn't that what F&G should be doing?
Well, I personally believe that we lose a lot of opportunities with the contractor to value engineer by the contractor coming into the project too late. The contractor should be brought on board earlier with their expertise as part of the team to give the client real value. At the moment, the contractor's coming on very late. What opportunities are there really for the contractor to be part of that team to value engineer the project? It's limited mainly to MEP. If they go for the structural, often the onus is on the contractor to redesign it under the FIDIC, etc., which puts a lot of pressure on them. And if there's delays, the contractor's the one who's going to get attacked. So, slightly going off subject, you need to change the whole procurement route to get the value engineering to really work how it should do in this region.
I think this is a valid point, but Morgan, sorry, you want to say something?
Well, I think it's interesting on the priorities, setting the priorities from the get-go. And this goes for all of us. It doesn't matter what side of the business you sit on. If you're the developer, if you're the consultant, the design consultant, or if you're the contractor. Those priorities need to be set up correctly from the beginning from the client side, right? Don't tell me that you want a Cartier watch if you only have the cost for a Timex, right? So it's about expectation and managing that expectation of creating that sense of value and starting that process off correctly. And that's with pre-planning and making sure that the developer and the client side, you have the right intel in your organizations that can offer you insight on your feasibilities, making sure that you're looking at the long-term life cycle of these projects and identifying your priorities to communicate effectively with your clients and your consultants. If your client can't and the developer can't effectively communicate to the consultants, what are they supposed to do, right?
Yep.
So they have to set that standard from the get-go. And it does vary from building type. You know, we can all say in the industry one building is the same as another, but the reality is the investment is very different. So what the financial requirements are for a residential tower, for instance, are very different than what the returns need to be for a hotel or a data center or industrial. So I think on the consultant side, the contractor side, and on the developer side, understanding what the priorities are from a financial metrics, that will help you make and identify the scope of what's important to you. Is it today cost? Is it long-term cost? And being able to align that from the beginning, and that just sets the stage for a successful process all the way through.
Fantastic. So I'll take, sorry, Binoy.
Yeah, just to answer to what you were saying about the contractor involvement, that's the direction we're heading as a developer now. We're trying to do early contractor involvement to avoid being in a situation where we would do cost cutting, which would be camouflaged as value engineering. Because you're absolutely right, there is confusion on the terminology. Sometimes developer or clients will camouflage value engineering project and cost cutting into value engineering. Well, it should be about creating value, and I think the VE, to go back to a bit to what you were saying, is more about taking the time to assess the project either at concept or at construction, and to see where the value is or where the capital is spent, and decide if there's a better return on your investment by moving some of the cable tray and freeing up a bit of money to do better front of house or creating more return for your investment, with, like you were saying.
Was that part of your experience with Alemco?
Yeah, I think that's one of the success that we have in Marina
You don't
Gate
have
project.
to be nice. You can say
I think it's a very successful project, honestly, and we have more successful, less successful project. This one was a very good collaboration, and that's the key word, collaboration. Even though it's not always perfect, you have to work with your consultant and your contractor to get the best product in the end. And that's done through value engineering, where you actually don't cost cut, but you take the time and you decide where you're gonna invest. So if I can save a bit here to create a better lobby, a better room, a better experience for the end user, if it's a residential tower, or a better classroom if it's a classroom, then it's worth it. In the end, you get the same quality.
If I want to just go one step back,
Sorry.
We've got three key messages here that we were just talking about. The first one starting with early engagement, not necessarily the contractor, but probably all the stakeholders on board. We're talking about setting the priorities, and I would like to combine your message with Benoit's message between communication and collaboration as well. So really three things here that we're talking about. But the biggest question that we normally ask ourselves, and if we want to implement this, when? Let's not talk about how, because how, I think we have other sessions throughout the day to address how we're going to implement value engineering and how we're going to take it forward. But my key question is, when do we start with value engineering? Any takers?
Always. We started from the beginning. This is a continual process. It doesn't need to be, and as we said, you do not wait, and you do not want to wait till the last phase of a project, because that is when you're going to get the minimal amount of return on your value engineering, right? So this is a continual process from the get-go, from scope setting to design management to construction to asset management. It's a full life cycle. And every single person involved in the project has a responsibility to that value engineering process and that value management process. It's one of those things where if you see something, say something. As a design consultant, if they see a better way to do something or a more effective way to do something, say something, raise it to your client. If the client sees something as a priority and says, you know what, the economy has changed and I really need to optimize this and I need your help, say it. The more that you can communicate with effectively to your team, the more you can all solve the same problem. But it's a continual process through the entire project.
Got you. How would you do that, Rob?
Look, I think when is definitely one of the big questions. I mean, everybody has a different agenda based on the timeline of the project.
Absolutely.
Generally, the MEP value engineering is done during the tender process. So if they go to 5, 6 MEP contractors, you're going to get all these different value engineering options, and the agenda of the MEP contractor during the tender stage is to win the job. It's not a collaborative approach from the MEP industry. We're literally putting anything and everything on the table to try and win the job. Whereas post-award, it's a bit more relaxed, there's more thought put into it, and you're not doing it independently, you're doing it in conjunction with the consulting engineer.
The application of value engineering can happen across the scope. It can happen at any time, but as we know, and as the panel have said, the earlier you introduce it into the team, the better you're going to get, the more you're going to get out of it. And I think Steve said it best. If you can find the time, and that's what we're all poor on. We're all poor on time. If you can find the time, and I think the clients and the end users are disciplined enough to gather those people and to really explore those opportunities around a table. The early introduction, they gave it a name, early contractor involvement. There is a mechanism where you can bring in a contractor or enemy people. There's NDAs and maybe even pay those people for their time.
Services, yeah.
Exactly, and then still put them out into the market to tender competitively. But it's just, again, finding the time and having the discipline to do that.
But to be fair to ourselves as well, and not to keep hammering ourselves, we are the owners of the time in one way or another. We can control that. I know that most of the time, you have to go back to your client, to the developer or to the governmental entity to address these situations. But I still believe that we are also in power as well. And if there is something that we want to change, then we can bring it on and we can actually make that effort. And I can tell you that, most of our clients will do listen to you when you have a key valued point that you want to address. I'm not sure what did you face, Tom, when you're working on various projects when the clients are not paying attention to value engineering. Did you manage to convince them other way?
It depends. So if you're tendering against the market, it's very difficult and you're not really empowered because a competitor will always say yes, whether it's a crazy budget, a crazy program, they'll commit to it, and if you don't, somehow you're out of the race. What we like to try and do at Alec Fit Out, we have a lot of repeat clientele. We will bid against the market to make sure that we're competitive, but then somehow you enter into a negotiation process with the client. And then you sit down and you look to interrogate from a fit-out point of view the key packages, the key trades, where there is value. So typically marble, joinery, FF&E. And if you're in that situation where you're negotiating, you have a mature client, you have a good consultant team, yes, you are empowered, and certainly you can bring value. But it's a very challenging market.
Yeah. Steve?
I mean, I want to go back to what Morgan mentioned earlier. She referenced value management, which is at the inception of the project. It's setting out the parameters of the project, how you're going to drive it forward to give the client value. And the value management sets these parameters. The team is working together, the early team. You're bringing on the cost consultant, the design consultants. You can get input from contractors as well. All the stakeholders are involved. And then you can move on to value engineering once the project is going in the right direction. At the moment, the value engineering is, as we said before, is cost cutting to get it back on target at the end of the project. But if the project's set up correctly to start with the correct program, as others are mentioning, a sufficient program, and the procedures, and everyone buying into it, you can achieve this. But I don't believe it is working the way it should do at the moment.
Well, is it not working because of the fact that we don't have the time to invest in value engineering, or because we're not aligned, or again, going back to the question number one, that we don't really understand what is value engineering?
I think a lot of it relates to time. The programs are so short on projects, and to actually propose value engineering, get it provisionally approved, and that takes a lot of time because you will submit a sample or you'll submit a value engineering solution, and it can take 2, 3, 4 weeks to try and get that approved. And if you have a program as a fit out for say 6 months, you don't have time to play around with value engineering, so it's a crash. But if you can have a more realistic program, if you can have more time, then I think you can successfully implement value engineering.
There's also the risk, again, going back to the timeline, if you as an MEP contractor during a tender stage and you come up with something clever and you commit to that value engineer option and you re-engineer it, the risk is that that option, once it gets submitted, goes out to the market and the work that you've put in is wasted. Someone else picks it up and...
Sure. Trust me, I faced that in the past. We had a proposal, and I asked the team to put another approach or an option, and really to put some real focus on value engineering. And we submitted both options, but we were not successful, and we realized that one of our competitors actually won the job, but with the option that we have presented. So it does happen. But to be honest with you, that should not stop us from doing our own value engineering as well.
Wouldn't you say that to some extent, Robert, that the value engineering process, if the engineering part of the project had enough time and enough resource to design your project exactly to your needs of the client, and I know, especially in this market, we're really pressured to deliver at fast pace, so there's, I wouldn't say a tendency, but there is a risk of copy-pasting specification, of not going in full depth in the design process and then just putting something to tender, and then you end up value engineering because you end up with specification which are over-spec, detailed which are repeated, and that there's that opportunity. If time was taken prior tender, during the process, fully understanding each specific project and designing your documentation accordingly, then you wouldn't have anything to value engineer because it would be perfectly done.
Sorry,
Which is
Morgan, you
maybe
wanted to say
impossible.
something.
I think the panel's hit on some key items on the timing. In the GCC and in Dubai in general, we are speed to market. We need to be on site as quickly as possible. We need to be churning out design documents as quickly as possible. And that's one of the fundamental issues that we have with value engineering in this region versus doing work in Australia or the US or other parts of the world where maybe a traditional methodology of traditional delivery of design bid build, where you actually are going out to tender on a more structured set of documents. Here it's speed to market of getting on the ground and moving dirt around as quickly as possible, which is great in certain aspects and it may be necessary in certain projects, but where I think Dubai is currently is evolving, quite frankly. It's becoming more mature where we're realizing, you know what, speed to market is important, absolutely. But we need to spend a little bit more time on our assumptions. We need to spend a little bit more time validating it, getting peer reviews, making sure we know what we're doing before we actually start bringing equipment to the site, we start going out to tender and we lock ourselves in. And then all of a sudden we deliver a project and we're going, wow, we overbuilt. We have too much stuff. Or we didn't think about this. And I think that's where there's an opportunity for, especially in this market. It's evolving. And it's becoming more mature where we need to spend a little bit extra time on the pre-development phase and the design phase to make sure, you know what, let's look around the table at all of our consultants. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Is it cost effective?
That's a very valid point. We have to keep in mind how young the country is. And it is a very dynamic market out there, very competitive. So many opportunities, and you have to compete against that, against those market conditions. You can't share too many of your experiences, but I do believe that collaborative approach is the sustainable approach. It's the one that you are measured by. The companies, especially the caliber of companies that are represented today, they are known because of their expertise and what they can offer back to the industry and to the client.
I agree with Robert. Obviously, the collaborative approach is the way forward. One thing I'd just like to touch on, particularly on the MEP value engineering approach, is I know fake news is a big thing at the moment, but there's fake VE out there as well, and it's definitely affecting the MEP tendering process. Recently, we were involved in a tender. The particular contractor put some numbers on the table. They were very attractive VE options, and that contractor got awarded on that basis. But it turned out they were target VE options, of which none of them really got past the consultant engineer or the client. So that contractor was then credited back with the value of the VE that he put on the table to win the tender, and it's. Fake VE is the new fake news.
Just going back to F&G from project management, cost consultancy perspective, how do you measure the success of what we call value engineering? Because we're engineers by the end of the day, and we're talking about 40 different disciplines, but we all love numbers by the end of the day. Aside from architects, they love fancy things. They don't care about numbers. But from your perspective, how can you present it to your client in a measurable way so that they can actually feel it, so that they can link it, they can make sense of it?
I mean, the client at the end of the day is looking at the CapEx. They don't tend to look at the OpEx so much because they think that's someone else's problem. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Depending on what kind of building, but yes, it can be right.
Yeah, they're looking at the CapEx costs generally. So obviously value engineering is meant to give better value It's a substitute which will improve the performance of the building or the value of the building, etc., but not lessen the product. So at the end of the day, they're just looking at the baseline figure. If we substitute this for this, or this procurement route for this procurement route, what is the cost benefit to us? That's all they want to know at the end of the day.
Well, aren't you moving now back into what we call cost reduction, and then we forget
No,
about
but
the quality
you're not-
and the time and...
You're not lessening the product.
Okay.
I mean, that's the whole idea of value
But you're not
engineering.
improving at the
meant to
same
be,
time.
It's meant to be the same or better.
Okay.
Cost cutting is reducing the quality of the product, which is what we tend to see here to get jobs over the line at tender stage, etc.
Or simply de-scoping.
Or simply de-scoping as well.
Yeah.
You know,
So it's totally different, and that is what we're really dealing with at the moment. I mean, we'd all love to do proper value engineering, but it's not happening how it should do.
Do we address value engineering towards the clients, or towards the contractors, or towards the end users? And I will, just support this question with a very simple example. I was working on a project, and we were to select different types of elevators. Some of them has 5 seconds delays, and some of them has 3 seconds delay. The 5 seconds delay is actually cheaper. So the developer wanted to put the 5 seconds delay elevator because it's cheaper. The consultant who was working on the project thought about it from a different perspective. That yes, the 3 seconds delay elevator is actually more expensive, but down the line for the end user, it will consume less electricity. So you will have to pay less for the electricity bill, and it's more sustainable. And that was a challenge. That was a challenge. Which party do you really want to focus on? Are you focusing on, again, going back to the sustainable parts and the end users, or you're focusing on the capital cost? How would you create the right balance?
But it's a balancing act, as you were rightfully saying a bit earlier. Yes, if you're looking purely at cost, you can go for the slower lift, but then it's your reputation, it's your brand identity. There's so many other aspects than just the capex cost that you factor in when you take this decision as a collaborative effort. So yes, the consultant will think one way, the architect will think the other way, the developer, but in the end, you got to do what's right for the project. And I think that's the main thing. It's thinking of the project in itself as a legacy in a way. You want that building to stand there for a long time and that people remember it in a good way.
I think you've hit on something very, very interesting. Bad value engineering, you'll notice. Good value engineering, the end user should never know it even existed, right? It's like bad design. Good design of a building, you don't even really notice it. It just flows. You walk through a space and it makes sense. You don't have to look at the signage really that much to understand where the restrooms are or where to go on their circulation path. Bad design, you'll never outrun. And it's the same thing with value engineering. If you do it poorly, that will be felt for the entire life cycle, from an end user to the systems management to the OpEx of the project, and that ripple effect will continue. So good value engineering should be invisible.
So when we're talking about value engineering, really, what are really the tools that we need to have in our lockers, in our experience, to implement value engineering? What do I need to bring to the table to implement value engineering? We talked about what, we talked about when, we talked about setting the priorities. The question is, do we have the right tools to bring in value engineering to our projects?
For me, you need a good, experienced builder. You need to bring him in early. You need to introduce him into the design early, and but I truly believe, and the rest of the panel will have their opinion. But that everything we've said today, bringing in the available tools that you have, and as Dr. Rashid said, there are 40 different consultants, and they can be acoustic experts, which will probably benefit the end user, energy consultants, structural engineers, bringing the people in, collaborating, offering those opportunities, exploring it, and in the end, it's always the clients.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So constructability, can I say?
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that. Bringing in, I suppose, exploring that design for its end user capability, obviously against the budget and the expectation for quality, But also, by bringing in the builder, you're adding the buildability into that formula.
So experts is one. Tom, do you want to add to that?
Well, your expertise, but it's a team. You need to have a number of functions working to successfully implement value engineering. So from a fit-out point of view, obviously we look at the interior finishing of a hotel, for example. So there's a lot of design detailing. Sometimes a design can be over-designed.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at simplifying a design. So you're still achieving the aesthetic, but by simplifying it, you're achieving a higher quality on site, and it's a quicker finish. So, so it's not just a cost benefit, it's more about time and quality. But when you need a team, so you need to have your design guys, your procurement guys, estimators, the operations guys to look at the buildability practicality of the design. So when you look at value, there's a number of components, and when you have that team working together with a client who knows what they want. So the client, if they want to, say, reduce their budget from 100 to 80, they have to make sacrifices to do that.
Sure.
So you need to be able to isolate where you want to do the value engineering and get buy-in from the client, and then obviously from the consultant team. They also have to be on board. So again, it's getting back to your alignment, making sure that everybody is agreeing where they need to end up.
Just on that point, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep pushing it. When you're talking about value engineering, you talked about cost reduction at the same time and cutting the budget. But let's put that on the side for a second. How is value engineering linked to sustainability when it comes to fit out? You're talking about sustainable items, you're talking about, and sustainability is a big thing. And actually the definition of sustainability is also not known for a lot of people when they talk about sustainable buildings. But from your experience as a fit-out contractor, putting that sustainability approach with value engineering, do they conflict or are they aligned?
To be honest, sustainability comes typically more into play with the MEP systems. From a fit-out point of view and the finishes that we look at, we are trying to achieve a specification, and obviously there's a life cycle of the finishes, and then within a hotel there will be, say, a refurbishment after 10 years. Mm-hmm. So from a sustainability point of view, not typically that's the requirement from fit-out.
Got you. Is that what you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think it goes back to being responsible on your approach to value engineering. I'll go back to Benoit's building, which is a green building, and he's got grey water articulation, he's got heat pumps instead of water heaters, and he had a limited total connected load provided by DWAP. So he was very restricted in what he could have and what he couldn't have. But none of those items were ever targeted as value engineering. None of the sustainability items were ever touched from a value engineer point
Do you
of view.
bring the right tools into your business when it comes to value
Yeah,
engineering?
I think you have to have a very strong engineering department within your MEP contracting, and you have to have a very strong consultant engineer on the design, and a client who is willing to get all three in the same room and trash it out. Yeah.
Morgan, what are your tools?
The tools that I would use is, one, looking at the technology. I think that's one thing that there's a session later today that we've kind of overlooked a little bit in this panel, but it is a reality of what we're living with. And there's amazing capabilities with tools like BIM modeling and things like that, which are really incredibly helpful to try and cut down costs and kind of look ahead at any issues on coordination. But there are limitations to that. There are limitations to those tools. They're very well advanced, but and we can use it for a certain percentage. But again, to the panel's point, there is a variety of different things that needs to come in when it comes to the sustainability, the building type. What is important to you long term, right? And understanding where, again, back to the original discussion, back to the priorities of the project. Sustainability for Dubai is a very, I don't want to say a new thing, but we're now in the built environment phase, in the life cycle phase of these buildings that, were built in the boom of the market, and now all these buildings are now coming up for renovation and refurbishment. So Dubai is kind of starting to get into that first cycle of, again, evolving and maturing in a market and seeing, okay, we did it like this the first time. Maybe we realized this was not actually the correct technique or the correct material to use. So I think there's a huge learning curve where Dubai really is excelling right now, where the consultants, the developers, and everyone around the table realizes that we've got some lessons learned from the last 10, 15 years in Dubai.
Yeah. Ben,
Yeah,
from
well,
Select Group.
You put it rightly. Lesson learned. I think that this value engineering comes, the main tool for value engineering is a state of mind. It's about being able to listen and question yourself, question all the stakeholder, and being able to take a step back and change the way you do things. Too often we are following the same path. Every project where we are, I'm not sure how to say that, like a horse blindfolded, or you have a track, and some people are reluctant to change. Value engineering is doing a workshop and trying to think other ways of doing things. And to go on the sustainability aspect, you could specify a material which comes from the States, and you could have the same or similar material which comes locally, and you would achieve a better value, and you would also improve your footprint, carbon footprint, because you don't import. So there are things that can be done to improve the sustainability and achieve a better value, because that saving could be passed along to something else in the project, better insulation, better. So there's
Absolutely, absolutely. Steve, what do you think about it?
Obviously, a lot of the sustainability which impacts myself financially is the OPEX costs. Going back to that, and generally the OPEX team doesn't get involved so much in the early stages of the project. If they could be more involved, they'd get the benefit what they want from the project going forward. So,
well, on that point, I would like really to get the audience a little bit engaged, and I hope that that coffee in the morning is still working. It hasn't faded away, so we're still having some kind of attention here. Does anyone have any questions or comments that you would like to bring to the stage or to address with one of our panelists? Any questions? I'm sorry I can't see clearly, but just in any case. We have a question there. Yeah? Can you please just mention your name and your company?
Hi, my
Hello.
name is Ismail from Wasl, Ismail Khaki from Wasl, which is developer. Thank you for the summit, and appreciate the audience and all the panels. The problem is, I think we are facing is about the value engineering is, as per FIDIC, for example, there is like profit sharing, which is 50-50. The problem is we are facing it. I know we started with value engineering, but we end up with cost reductions.
Yeah.
In a majority of whatever we do, okay, we change this marble to this marble, or we change this glass or aluminum section to aluminum section. We change this AC to this another AC, which basically we see it as a developer. It is more in cost reduction than the value engineering. Or we afraid of ending that we went in cost reduction route. That's why when we do a lot of value engineering and cost reduction as well. And I think I met some of the people are here. We done several projects. We would like, as a developer, we would like to start it as a cost reduction, if it's value engineering, or we have a proposal which we call it profit sharing.
Gotcha.
Rather than, because for us it's a cost. And as you said also, other thing is the problem is that one of the other issue, we have ego issue, to be honest. When the contractor comes on board and propose something as a value engineering, they will have a lot of resistance from the engineer. Because he done a design is not economic design, where he's supposed to do economic design for the client, to be honest. That's where you will find a lot of other resistance. That's why the value engineering is not much successful in this market, for example. So these are the other aspects. For sure, we would like to have the contractor on board in the beginning, but should be a cost which I have agreed with them, because, for example, if I have the concept, they will not do for me engineering free of cost.
Yeah.
And there is engineer is already he get paid to do that design.
True.
So for me, I would like, shall I pay this guy or that guy? There is always value for money, and today the value or the money is very important in today's market. To be honest, with the situation which we are in, the market is not going down, but the situation in the market.
Which is fantastic. I think you have really some good valid points. We're talking about value engineering. but we suddenly deviate from that and it becomes a pure cost reduction. We're talking about alignment and clarity about what exactly we're trying to achieve. Is that something any of...
Yeah, but it's getting back to what we've spoken about. There's
Yeah.
a disconnect between sometimes the procurement and the operations. So you have a design, you will tender it or negotiate it, but if you are proposing value engineering, you have to agree this in principle before you start work on site.
Yeah.
You know, it's very important, and then take the time then to obviously get it approved. You don't want to start proposing value engineering that's not agreed in advance because it leads to conflict.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
it needs to be documented because this is very important to protect both the client and the contractor.
Gotcha.
Just you're saying you're getting resistance from the engineer that did the design originally, and that's the engineer's job. He designed it. He's probably designed the best system you can possibly get out there for you as a client, and it's very important that the engineer resists value engineering if it's not suitable.
If it's not suitable, but
Yeah.
I think where the gentleman's comment was mainly focusing on that there is a resistance regardless whether if it's valuable or not. Because it's our design, it's an ego thing rather than a valuable input into the equation, which what we really should leave behind when we come to the table talking about.
Sure, but from
value
an
engineering.
MEP point of view, you're dealing with a very complex systems, a lot of parts that all talk to each other. So, for instance, if the engineer specified a chiller that cost 1 million dirhams, and somebody wanted to value engineer it down to 500,000, it's not going to be the same product. It's not going to do the same thing. It's not going to last the same amount of time. If with the 1 million dirham chiller you get a 2-year warranty, and somebody else is offering a product for 1.2 million dirhams and you're getting a 10 million dirham warranty, that's value engineering. Even though you're paying more as a client, that's better value.
Absolutely. Morgan?
I think there's two amazing things that you talked about. One of the
Thanks.
things that we, but one of the things that I think is key is trust in your consultants, right? And again, as designers and consultants and anybody who is on the consulting side, we need to look at ourselves from an ego standpoint and not be precious. Not be precious. We are all, extreme professionals in our discipline, and we're very good at our discipline. But we shouldn't be worried about someone else questioning what decisions have been made.
Yep.
And quite frankly, it's one of those things that, when you're in university or going through school and you'd write a paper for class and you try to proofread it all the way through, and sometimes you miss one of the most basic mistakes, a typo or something, because you're reading it from your perspective. Sometimes it takes a peer review. Sometimes it takes somebody else to come in and take a look at it and say, yeah, this makes sense on your design, but maybe you could do this. And I think that's one thing, is one, trusting in your experts, trusting getting valuable experts from up front, and two, on the consulting side, making sure that we're not precious about holding on the information. We know that everybody has the best intention, and we all have the perspective on it, but don't be afraid to get a colleague or a peer to kind of review the work and say, look, do you see any opportunities to make this better?
Trust, that's a big word. Any other questions from the audience? We have one there in the middle, if you don't mind, please. Sorry, we can't. Yeah, now we can. Please go ahead.
Okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Azam Khalid. I'm the CEO of Cobiax Middle East. And Cobiax is a system that we use in the slabs in order to reduce on the concrete and steel quantities. We do value engineering. We support engineering offices with value engineering, but we usually have two problems. The first problem is there is always no time to redo or get the system or any new system involved in the design of the engineering office or the consultant. And the second problem that we usually have is like the party, whether it is the engineering office or the client or the contractor, they look at the direct pure cost. So we prepare, for example, a value engineering report that includes engineering benefits, which finally they go into money, right? And but usually like when you submit a report, the counterparty will just look at the final digit, the digits that how much saving or what is the total cost that you're talking about. So they don't look usually in the same report, like in the values, in the real engineering values, which again, they translate these values, engineering values, into money.
Yep.
So these time and focusing only on the one digit, the money.
Absolutely. I think that's another valid point, which in line with what we talked about earlier, really how to measure the value engineering. Is it really purely money, or is it quality, or is it time, or is it the process, or is it the end users, or the developers, or the contractors, consultant equation? It's a great balance between everyone. I'm sorry we're running out of time. Very interesting discussion that we had from all of you. I'm just going to ask you for a personal favor. Dr. Rashid earlier today really inspired me personally with a simple equation that he had. He said, everybody can have a dream, but that dream is just a dream, and without passion, there is no synergy between the two. And we're going to be meeting together next year from now, and I hope that Gavin will invite the rest of the people. If anyone is not required for next year, you need to tell them from now. So
It's a fraternity now.
Yeah.
just to make sure. So
Value engineering.
when we come back next year, we don't really want to go back and talk about exactly the same thing. Let's talk about what we have achieved in value engineering over the year. I'm sorry to say it, but every time we get together, we talk about things, and the year after, we sit down and we're still talking about the same thing. Oh, how are we going to implement? How are we going to do? And how are we going to make a difference? Well, stop with the how. We've talked enough about the how. Let's implement. And this is really the favor that I'm going to ask you as a panelist and the rest of the audience. If you even can write it down on the booklet, on the agenda, what am I going to do different this year to implement value engineering and take it forward? So next year, when we sit down around the table, we want to talk about achievements. You know what? I'm going to ask you guys, what have you achieved over last year? And you say, I've done this and this and that, and the outcome was this and that. Maybe I was fired out of the project. I lost money here, but guess what? No, I made a success. I provided a quality project. My client was happy. The end user was happy. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Please join me in thanking the panelists for their time and input. Thank you so much. Thank you.